Guess what I just finished? Eee. Hey y'all, Catherine here. As you may have noticed, most of the things on my channel are either skating related or music or sewing, a little bit of acting thrown in there. But I kind of want to change and like shift gears this summer, and start putting up more content that's like me being passionate about nerdy things that I love. So that leads me to this book that I got 2 days ago and I already finished, because I'm an extremely slow reader and have OCD while reading. More on that in another video, probably. I'm a fan of the original Hunger Games series, obviously. I mean, I'm wearing the pin, you kind of can't see it because of the lighting. Um, and I was in a fan film that was generally well received, and Entertainment Weekly gave it a mention. Um, I'll put the link below in the info box. So when I first heard about this new prequel coming out, I was like really skeptical. Um, I thought it was probably unnecessary. A lot of series have done prequels that didn't quite measure up to the originals. And I was like, why do we need to learn Snow's backstory? He's the villain. But then I started thinking about it with all the events that have been happening the past few years leading up to this current worldwide crisis. And particularly in the US, I realized that diving into the making of a villain could actually bring some insight into our current situation. So I started reading it, and before I actually get to reviewing it, from this point on, spoilers abound. So if you haven't read the book, please turn this video off, save it for later, put it in your watch later list. I don't want to spoil people because I hate that. But other than that, let's get started. So, first of all, I think the book is a nice addition to the series. I'm not saying I love it because I kind of like to let a book simmer for a little bit before making that kind of judgment. Um, but I'm just going to list like a couple of the great things about it so far. First of all, it matches the style and tone of the other three books. In writing, in terms of how the characters interact, like the worldview. So that was really nice. Second of all, there was no retconning that I could detect upon a first read through. For those of you who don't know, retconning is when you kind of go back and change some of the lore or ideals of a series to kind of, I don't even know what the point of it is. Make it fresh, make it new. Um, I'm going to reference this a lot, but Star Wars is infamous for doing that, because they had the original book series or multiple book series that came out after the first three movies. But then after the prequels and after the most recent trilogy, all of those book series and the mythology and the lore and the storyline that they had built up kind of got erased. That's retconning. So there's none of that in this so far, which is great. The characters, no matter how evil or unapproachable or weird, um, or like grotesque they are, they're all still really fleshed out and you feel some sort of like sympathy for them. Um, like you get why they do what they do, which Suzanne Collins is great at. Like every single one of her characters feels like an actual person, like with ideas and feelings and wants and needs. I also loved the focus on music. I mean, you get a little bit of that in the first three books as well, because, kind of like folk songs are really integral to the story. Um, but there are a ton of new ones in this book. And as a composer, I could just read through the lyrics and be like, oh, I can tell where this song is going. It sounds perfect in my head. I'd love to write some, but I know they're probably going to start doing that for like the eventual movie that's going to come out. So I don't want to like have my own version in my head and then have it get replaced by another version later on down the line. But I reserve the right to change that and actually write one of the songs. There was a nice interweaving of old characters and new characters. None of it felt forced, which was great. And there was like that surprise like connection between, spoiler, um, Coriolanus Snow and Tigress, which I wasn't expecting. Um, and it was kind of cool to see the origins of their familial relationship. And I do love the new characters, especially like the obviously Coriolanus's tribute, Lucy Gray Baird. I think that's gonna be how they pronounce it, Baird. She was like not like Katniss, which I think is good. She was her own character. She was different. Um, she was more outgoing. Um, she knew how to play to a camera, which is almost the polar opposite of Katniss, in a way. So that was really cool to kind of see that new character. And like, I feel like I relate to that. Like, I mean, I love Katniss, don't get me wrong. I've cosplayed her a million times, but I related to the ability to kind of like turn things on for a camera, play to an audience, that kind of stuff. Also, she sings, which, as you know, I love to sing. Whew. Getting sweaty. Too much talking. Um, I liked that there were like a lot of aha moments when you can kind of see where things from the first series tie in to this book. There are a lot of puzzle pieces that kind of fall into place and make more sense. Um, like how the path of Panem got from being North America and the US to the war to post war to Katniss's era. Like it all makes sense, which is hard to do with prequels. Yeah, Star Wars. I liked that it was all condensed into one book and like she didn't feel the need to like stretch it out into a new trilogy. In fact, I'd like to see like another prequel from a different point of view or something like that. Um, but also, can we talk about like the significance of the Hanging Tree song and the Mockingjay? Like, that is some really, really deep stuff. Like, if you go back and watch or read the first trilogy now, it's going to feel so different because now you know like the backstory of how intrinsically linked President Snow is to District 12, to the Mockingjay, to the Hanging Tree song. Um, it's just meta, for lack of a better term. That being said, there are a few things I would have liked to have seen done differently. Um, the ending felt a little bit rushed and like it was too convenient of a wrap up for Snow's character, but that may have been intentional. Um, I do think that too much time was spent building him up in the peacekeeper chunk of the book, though. Um, like by the end of the book, I almost felt like the Hunger Games were like an afterthought, and that they were just there to build his relationship with Lucy Gray. Um, Again, maybe intentional. It was just a little bit jarring for me. Um, Also, sometimes even though Snow complained about his life circumstances, he kind of whined a lot, things were still conveniently handed to him by the end. Like, he spends all this time worrying about, oh, woe is me, things aren't going my way, I'm not living up to the Snow name or dynasty or whatever. But he still gets what he wants in the end, which isn't really a criticism of the book so much. Maybe it's, I guess, kind of an accurate representation of white, wealthy male privilege. So that was probably an intentional commentary on that. Tigress turned out to be a really great character, but I felt like she was a bit of a prop. I would have loved to have seen more of her. And actually, she would be one of the characters I would love to see a prequel from. Um, but yeah, I feel like she was just kind of there to support Snow and like, console him when needed, cook his food when needed. Um, but you didn't get to see too much of her. I would have liked to have seen more of her. Suzanne Collins, please make a prequel with Tigress's point of view happen. I want to read it. Also, even though you sort of get to sympathize with him, Coriolanus is obviously such a dick. And like, I know people like that. And it was kind of jarring um, to feel sorry for him and almost root for him sometimes. It's kind of like if you've ever read Death Note. and you feel yourself starting to root for Yagami Light, and you're like, wait, no, this guy's a murderer. Why am I rooting for him? And it was disturbing, but I guess that's just how effective Suzanne Collins's writing is. Um, but it still made me feel a little gross, just like the heat right now because it's so hot. But yeah, like I never thought that I would be reading a dystopian book in the middle of a budding dystopia. Um, but here we are. It actually gave the story a lot of depth and poignancy um, to read certain passages. I'm actually going to read one of them for you. Bear with me a second as I pull it up on my phone. I took a picture because there was a passage that just really stood out to me in these times that we're living in right now. If the people who were supposed to protect you played so fast and loose with your life, then how did you survive? Not by trusting them, that was for sure. And if you couldn't trust them, who could you trust? All bets were off. Like that kind of reminds me of what's happening with the current administration. They're not there for us. We can't trust them to have our best interests at heart. So yeah, there were like certain little snippets that kind of just like really hit home for me. And the theme of the book, or at least the lesson that Snow thinks he learns, is all about the three C's: control, chaos, and social contracts. In a sense, a lot of the thinking behind the idea of the capital ends up making sense when you read it through his eyes. Without control, the social contract that people have entered into when creating a government will be broken, and people will descend into chaos. We're kind of seeing that now in multiple places across the US where people are having trouble finding the balance between personal freedoms and social responsibility for public safety. Our democracy is supposed to be a social contract that allows us to have freedoms, but also gives us a responsibility to protect our fellow citizens. And when state governments, have tried to exercise even the tiniest form of control so that we can save as many lives as possible during this pandemic, people have reverted to like a selfish instinct of personal gratification above all else, even at the expense of the lives of their fellow citizens. In essence, chaos. And I'm not trying to make the case that the Capitol is in the right. All I'm saying is that this book is a really good commentary on the need for that balance between freedoms and sacrifices for social good. If the pendulum swings too far in one direction, you get a dictatorship. Too much in the other direction, and all hell breaks loose. All hell breaks loose. In both scenarios, innocent people lose their lives in the shuffle. I mean, obviously we're seeing that right now. So I guess you could say that the Hunger Games makes the case for responsible democracy and compassion and kindness for everyone. Duh. Same with this book. It urges us to get away from our baser instincts because really by this point in history, we should be more evolved than that. It shouldn't take a book to remind us, but I feel like some people just kind of like need a little nudge, and this book kind of could give some people a nudge. So thank you for sitting through this review, which ended up being more like an essay. I really miss school, apparently. The book is a great read, especially for fans of the series. It's a brilliant piece of writing, as usual. Like, there weren't many grammar issues or word usage problems. And I can see this being read across the country in classrooms in a few years, much like the first 3 books in the series. If you have anything you want to add to the discussion, feel free to comment below. And as I ramp up making more videos this summer, please like and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. I am going to be as nerdy as possible, so it's going to be great. Until we chat again, may the odds be ever in your favor. Seriously, keep yourself safe, wear a mask, don't die. The end. Peace out. I forgot to show you my braid. Isn't she beautiful? Yeah, bye.